There are very few stories that don't simply entertain us for a brief moment, but stay with us long enough to quietly shape who we are, becoming a part of our inner world in ways we don't fully realize until much later. Harry Potter was never just a franchise to me. It became a kind of safe space, something I could return to whenever reality felt overwhelming, a world that offered comfort without ever feeling like an escape from meaning. It was a place I kept going back to, again and again, for the magic that made everything feel possible, for the friendships that felt real and grounding, for the bravery that made fear feel conquerable, and for that indescribable spark, the one that didn't just tell a story, but ignited imagination. And now it's coming back. Not as a continuation of what already exists, not as a side story built around it, but as a complete re-adaptation, a chance to revisit something deeply familiar and yet experience it in an entirely new way. And with that comes something far more layered than simple anticipation. Because this isn't just about excitement for what this version could become, or hesitation about how it might change. It's about holding both of those emotions at the same time. A set of hopes that this retelling might finally capture the depth, the detail, and the emotional truth the story always carried within it. And a set of fears that in trying to recreate something so deeply loved, it might lose the very essence that made it feel like home. So before we judge what this adaptation turns into, let's take a moment to understand what we're truly hoping for and what we're afraid of losing.
Fear number 1. Bad decisions. Sometimes the concern isn't just about what decisions are being made, but about what those decisions reveal beneath the surface. I don't feel the need to repeat every argument surrounding the casting of Snape, or to dissect it from every possible angle. But what does worry me, deeply, is the chain of thought that led to that choice being proposed in the first place, and more importantly, approved. Because decisions like this don't exist in isolation. They reflect judgment. They reflect awareness. They reflect how carefully or carelessly the material is being handled. And in this case, it feels less like a bold creative risk and more like something that hasn't been fully thought through. Because when a single decision is enough to shake the trust of a large part of the fandom, it doesn't just create debate, it creates doubt. Doubt about whether the people shaping this story truly understand the world they're adapting. Doubt about whether they're considering the long-term implications of their choices rather than just the immediate reaction. There's a saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. And if that holds true here, then it's hard not to feel uneasy. Because this adaptation isn't just another retelling. For many, it feels like the only real opportunity to revisit this story with the depth and care it always deserved, to explore what the films couldn't, to restore what was lost, and to finally present the world in its most complete form. Which is exactly why decisions like this matter so much. Not because they are controversial, but because they raise a much bigger question. Is this story truly in the right hands? Hope 1. Finally doing justice to Ginny Weasley. In the films, Ginny Weasley barely existed. But in the books, she wasn't just present, she was a force. She was sharp, self-assured, and unapologetically herself in a way that felt earned, not given. This is someone who, at a very young age, endured something deeply traumatic, and instead of being defined by it, she rebuilt herself from within, piece by piece, until that vulnerability transformed into strength. But the films never allowed that transformation to fully exist. Because in the books, Ginny doesn't simply end up with Harry as a convenient resolution. She grows into someone who stands beside him as an equal, someone who challenges him, understands him, and chooses him just as much as he chooses her. And that difference is everything. Fear number 2. How do you replace an iconic score? Before we ever saw Hogwarts on screen, we heard it. And in those first few notes, the world didn't just begin, it revealed itself, as if the music had always existed and we were simply arriving late to something timeless. John Williams gave the Harry Potter world its emotional language, something so deeply embedded in our memory that it feels inseparable from the story itself. So yes, the idea of replacing that feels almost impossible, but maybe replacing is the wrong word entirely. Because if someone like Hans Zimmer steps into this world, it isn't about filling a void or competing with what came before. It's about stepping into a legacy and finding a new way to let it breathe. Zimmer is a composer who understands how to make moments feel monumental, how to let silence speak just as loudly as sound, and how to build an atmosphere that lingers long after a scene has ended. And that's what makes this so compelling. Because this isn't an easy task. It's not meant to be. Reinterpreting something so iconic isn't about surpassing it. It's about engaging with it, respecting it, and finding a new emotional truth within it. It's about creating something that feels just as lasting, just as powerful, and just as unforgettable in its own way.
Hope number 2. Fixing what the films got wrong, especially books 4 and 6. Not all adaptations are created equal. Some stories were translated with care. Others were reduced to moments. Goblet of Fire should have felt like a full-fledged thriller, layered with tension, mystery, and a world that stretches far beyond Hogwarts. Instead, it was simplified into a sequence of tasks. And Half-Blood Prince, the story that truly unpacks Voldemort, left his past feeling incomplete, almost like missing pieces of a puzzle. This is where a series has an advantage. More time allows the story to breathe, to explore memories in depth, to build the world with intention, and to give emotions the space they deserve. Fear number 3, the Stranger Things problem. Harry Potter is built on a structure that feels simple on the surface, but is incredibly fragile underneath. 1 year at Hogwarts, one contained story, and one quiet step closer to an inevitable end. It's a rhythm the audience subconsciously understands, a sense of time that feels consistent, almost sacred. But real life doesn't follow that rhythm. Actors don't pause between seasons, they grow, subtly at first, and then all at once, until the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Faces begin to change, voices deepen, physicality shifts, and suddenly the illusion of one school year at a time starts to crack. And time, unlike storytelling, doesn't wait to be convenient. It moves forward whether the narrative is ready or not. We've already seen how this plays out, when long gaps between seasons begin to stretch the believability of a story that's supposed to feel continuous, immediate, and grounded in a specific stage of life. But in Harry Potter, this isn't just a minor inconsistency, because here, age progression isn't background detail, it's part of the storytelling itself. Each year matters. Each stage of growing up carries emotional weight. Each transition feels earned because it unfolds at the right pace. So if that timing is disrupted, if years pass for the actors while only months pass in the story, the entire foundation begins to feel unstable. And that's what makes this such a real concern. Because if this series truly wants to succeed, it doesn't just need to tell the story well, it needs to move with it. Hope number 3. Bringing back the real Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley deserved better, not as a character, but as an adaptation. Because somewhere along the way, his intelligence, his bravery, his emotional depth were handed off to other characters, and what was left was comic relief. But Ron is more than jokes. If this series gets Ron right, it doesn't just fix a character, it restores the balance of the trio. Biggest fear. How do you top Prisoner of Azkaban? There's one film in this entire saga that doesn't just adapt the story, it reimagines it, reshapes it, and somehow makes it feel more immediate, more intimate, and more alive than anything that came before or after. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban isn't just remembered because of what happens in it, but because of how it feels. The passage of time isn't explained, it's experienced. The weight of fear isn't told, it lingers in the air. The world doesn't look magical in a conventional sense. It feels real, unpredictable, and quietly haunted. And in doing so, it achieves something incredibly rare. It doesn't just translate the book, it elevates it. Not by changing the story, but by understanding its soul so deeply that it finds new ways to express it through cinema. So when we talk about this new series, the question becomes heavier, almost uncomfortable, because it's no longer about whether the show will be faithful, or whether it will be detailed, or even whether it will be good. It's about whether it can reach that rare space where storytelling stops feeling like adaptation and starts feeling like interpretation at its highest level. Because that's the standard Prisoner of Azkaban set, and reaching that level doesn't just require time or budget or accuracy, it requires vision.
The kind of vision that doesn't just recreate a world, but makes us feel like we're discovering it for the very first time all over again.
If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe for more video essays exploring the craft of storytelling.
So smash that subscribe button